This is the new Sophier's Volume S, and it might just be my favorite vocal IEM under $500. I heard some people calling this a mini Studio Force because they actually graph pretty similar, with the difference being that the Volume S trades off some of that treble detail for better scaling and shifts the focus more onto the vocals and the mid-range, as well as having a little bit more oomph in the mid-bass. And because it trims off the treble more, it allows the music to kind of just breathe and scale better than the Studio Force. It becomes more immersive overall and quote-unquote more musical when it comes to the playback. And because of the better scaling, it really pulls you into the music more. You feel more connected to the sound without sacrificing the low end or like a sense of space, because even though the bass and treble region isn't the main focus, it's not very bassy or very treble heady, they still hold up and you get enough of the thump and air without the Volume S sounding, too lean or too dark. To me, this is a slightly less technical and balanced version of the Studio Force. It's less all-rounded, quote-unquote, and instead it trades off some of that balance for better scaling, as well as just popping out more when it comes to the vocals. As a vocal lover myself, the Volume S sounds better on pretty much every vocal-centric song that I tested it with against the Studio Force. For example, Self-Control by Frank Ocean has this extra layer of rawness and vulnerability that's revealed better when you switch over to the Volume S. You hear Frank's breathing, the vocal nuances better, the small details better. The vocals are just cleaner, they're clear, they pop up a bit more. You just hear them more because they're more forward in your face, but not overly bearing, not shouty or anything like that. The timbre is also pretty solid, no metallic BA shenanigans. It's not harsh, it's not sharp, and not too overly peaky. And although you can't really crank them as much as the Explorer, it gets close, and you also don't need to because the vocals already have a good amount of gain. Now, as for the branded versus custom drivers debate, the main ick that some people have is because even though branded and custom don't sound too much different, especially when it comes to well implemented BAs like Sophier's, the issue is if you charge $300 with branded BAs, that makes more sense because there is an upcharge for the better QC and etc. But with non-branded ones, these should be slightly cheaper at around $200 or $250. So I can see some pushback due to just the whole branding shenanigans. But sound wise, these sound good. The Volume S also has a switch that allows you to boost the upper mids and treble while lowering the bass. It basically turns into a cleaner version of Harman 2019, very technical for the price, even a little bit more detailed than the Studio Force in that configuration. But I personally find the boosted version a bit shouty and lean. It's very clean, yes, but it also sounds a bit clinical and too referencey for me. I think it needs a little more thickness in the bass or a little bit less gain when it comes to the overall sound. Now, if you listen at lower volume, then it works, but the boosted version doesn't scale nearly as well as the stock tuning, which I like and prefer a lot more. But you do have the option for both mid and high volume with these switches, which is a nice addition. Tip-wise, I also do recommend the clear tips that it came with. These are very nice. It boosts the treble a bit more, and then it also fits very comfortable for me personally. You also have the USB-C adapter. Now, I'm not sure if this is sold separately because it kind of just came with my Volume S, but if you use this, you get a little bit more sub bass, a little bit more rumble. However, don't expect a crazy amount of boost. The low end is still on the cleaner side. It's more controlled, it's more well balanced. It reminds me of the Pilgrim in that sense, which is a leaner set. So yeah, the USB-C does add a little bit more rumble, but don't expect thick or heavy slam to the notes. Don't expect a shaking feeling in your chest. The texture isn't going to stack up against something like the High 4s, the T Pros. It just does a good job with balancing the low end with the sound that it's trying to go for. Now, versus some other sets, if you want a more all-rounder sound, the Studio 4 is still good. It goes on sale for around $350. It doesn't specialize as much as the Volume S. It doesn't scale as well when it comes to vocals. The vocals don't pop out as much, or it's not going to be as clean and neutral versus the boosted switch configuration. But the Studio 4 is still very well balanced, still very good BA bass. I still don't know what they're feeding their BAs. It's still a solid option. You also have the EM10s as well. Now, I don't see them going on sale for $350 as much as before, but they are more detailed. They are the better all-rounders. They have a little more bass, a little bit more treble, kind of to balance things out versus the Volume S. You also have the Super Mix 4, which is a cheaper version, the better value. And overall, if you want an all-rounder, the Super Mix 4 is still a very solid set. Or you can go for the CKLVX D62 with the Senkai wides, which is cheaper and it's more dynamic, it's more engaging, it's a better all-rounder playback versus the Studio 4s and the Volume S. I personally like it the best out of all the quote-unquote all-rounder sets. around $200. And then if you want something more laid back, the Origin is a very good pick. It's clean, slightly warm, very well extended in the treble, good neutral set. And then you also have the Volume S actually at mid volume in the stock configuration. It's pretty neutral if you don't like crank it up, because the vocals are like downward sloping Harman. It doesn't have that much bass. It's a chill, laid back neutral set at mid volume, but it really comes alive and become like a vocal monster once you give it more scaling. So overall, the Volume S is pretty flexible when it comes to the sound. It's not gonna be a bassy set. Again, High 4s, T-Pros, Deuce, those will all be better, but you do get 3 different sounds depending on your listening volume. You know, you get a clean, clear, technical sound at mid volume with the boosted upper mid treble switch, and then you get a slightly laid back and neutral sound signature at mid volume with the stock switch, and then finally a vocal centric sound at higher volume with the stock switches. The only real downside would probably be the pricing, because these aren't using branded drivers, so there isn't an upcharge when it comes to the pricing. So they probably could have sold this for probably like 250, 200 bucks. So, you know, maybe get it on sale. But I do want to nitpick on something. Whoever did the switch design, guy was a bit cooked. Let me explain, because they don't match. When I have the switches on the same placement on both sides, instead of getting, you know, the same tuning on both the left and right side, I get one stock and the other one with the boosted upper mids and treble sound. So in order to get the same tuning, you need to have the switches on the opposite end of each other on both sides, which is very confusing, right? It also doesn't have any indicators or, you know, markers to show you which is boosted and which is stock, like the Diva, for example. At least that, even with the channel imbalance, they at least kind of label it for you, right? So just watch out for those. And then there's also the whole marketing shenanigan claiming that the passive radiator is another DD. And I'm not saying the passive radiator doesn't work, because, you know, they did claim it that it does make the bass cleaner, and the bass is indeed very clean. Now, is that because it has no bass, you know, is because of the tuning, or is it because of the actual radiator? Just know that on the vast majority of IEMs, the passive radiator doesn't really work. But those things aside, great sounding IEM. Now, as for the Tangzu WUZETIAN Legend Edition, I got some bad news. I know it looks very nice. I know you guys are tempted by the color, but it is very spicy. This is a treble headset with noticeable planar timbre, arguably as bad as the Brain Damage in some ways. Now, the pro is, this is very technical, it's very detailed, lots of treble nuances, maybe a bit too much, you know, it punches well above the price, even a bit better than the ET142, but it just sounds artificially boosted in the air. Let me put this into perspective for you guys. The Legend has 3 regions, anywhere from an extra 4 dBs to 9 dBs boost in the treble over the ET142 that was already bright. Now, it doesn't have the 2K peak like the ET142, but once you combine all the boosted regions in the treble, it really starts adding up, and it does get like arguably shoutier. If Tangzu used ESTs and made this just like smoother when it comes to tuning, it might actually have worked. I can see this being like a bright leaning all-rounder set, but the planar, their tuning is just not as smooth and natural versus the ESTs. Back to the Brain Damage. Even though the Legend isn't as thin like the Brain Damage, it doesn't have the scoop, it's not as tilted towards the upper mids and treble. However, it is noticeably more boosted when it comes to treble. We're talking a 5 dB boost. In some sense, I would actually take the Brain Damage over this, because it is smoother. It's sizzly, but it's smoother, but it is also 2 times more, so I don't know. They're both not the best. The Legend is too energetic, it's a bit too bright, and the Brain Damage is too thin and overly sizzly when it comes to the timbre. So I would probably avoid both of them just stock wise. To save you guys the time, both the OG WU and the Heyday is better when it comes to the tonality and the timbre. Even though they both got some of that, you know, planarness, it's more balanced. The treble isn't gonna be like destroying your ears at least. The Legend, on the other hand, is just a bit too boosted. It's very technical, you know, in a sense. If you're looking for more detail, you know, sure, the Legend is better when it comes to that department. It actually punches above its price, but I just can't listen to this past 60 dBs. Tracks like Model, Butterfly Yoshika, K-pop, J-pop, energetic songs, EDM, if you try to turn those up, your ears are gonna get fried. Unless you are a treble head, you like listening to at like a lower mid volume, or you have some form of hearing loss, I would not really recommend the Legend stock. Now, with the 300 and 500 Mitch filter, these could work. It's tamer and it is a very pretty set. I get why people would want this, but you can also just get the ET142 with the new nozzles, which I'll talk about soon, or the Timeless 2. Both of those are just better and offer more than the Tangzu Legend in my opinion. For example, the new black nozzles on the ET142 is very similar to the Timeless 2, and then the red nozzles kind of just like tames it down and makes it like more of a warm leaning sound. So you do get a lot more variety with the ET142, and if they do decide to keep the blue nozzle as well, like the stock one that was, you know, more bright, then you have a lot of variety going from bright, balanced to kind of like a warm leaning sound. And then the Timeless 2 on the other hand is just, you know, very well rounded, it's still pretty smooth, and you got a lot of tuning switches and variety with the Timeless 2 as well. If I were to rank them, I would put the ET142 with the new nozzles first because the fit is just better for me. The Timeless 2 is a little bit weird when it comes to circle thing, but after that, probably Timeless 2. Both of those are interchangeable when it comes to sound and performance. And then after the Timeless 2, it would be the T10 Pros. They just sound more unique. It's a mini meteor, it's warmer, it scales better, it doesn't kill your ears like the Legend, which would be last place unfortunately, because it is a little bit, just a bit too bright out of the recent planars that came out. But yeah, keep an eye out for the updated ET142. I'm not sure when it's going to be released, but the newer nozzles should be more palatable, more enjoyable for most people now. But that aside, thanks for watching guys. I hope you found the review helpful. Stay tuned for the Meteor. I don't know when that's going to come in. They still haven't shipped it yet, so we'll find out, but see you later.
Shout out to Rorix Cat, Dom Q, Discal Scotus, B Urak, Mystic Spoon Attack, Walker Standard, User, Patrick, Polly J, Mr. Gorillas, Anton Risto, Gis Sang Young, Ed Dunlap, Christopher Jackson, Name, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Ben Thompson, Obi, Treble Well Extended, Wizard, Frickalicious, Andrick, Ricardo, Tapas R, Chucko Norris, Oh Really, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Shren Buck Lee, Nico, Igris, and Forever New. Thank you guys so much for the year.